Namaste and welcome to our continuing series, The Synthesis of Yoga with Ranganath. And we will be starting on with the chapter 3-4 Life, and we are on page number 28, starting from the last line, the utility of the compromise.
So, we'll read the whole para first and then we'll come back to it. The utility of the compromise in the then actual state of the world cannot be doubted. It secured in India a society which lent itself to the preservation and the worship of spirituality, a country apart in which, as in a fortress, the highest spiritual ideal could maintain itself in its most absolute purity, unoverpowered by the siege of the forces around it. But it was a compromise, not an absolute victory. The material life lost the divine impulse to growth, the spiritual preserved by isolation its height and purity, but sacrificed its full power and serviceableness to the world. Therefore, in the divine providence, the country of the yogins and the sannyasins has been forced into a strict and imperative contact with the very element it had rejected, the element of the progressive mind, so that it might recover what was now wanting to it. Okay, so it's an interesting para, and we'll go back to the beginning and see what he's saying. So, what's this compromise that he's speaking about? The compromise, if you remember in the previous para, or maybe the one before that, he told you that in India, the progressive mind was not there after the Vedic period. So, in the Vedic period, there was the progressive mind, and there was no rejection of life, and there was also a very deep spiritual life. The Vedic period, in fact, the number of sages, I had taken once the trouble of writing down from the Rig Veda all the sages, because their names appear on each mandala, anuvak, and then the mantra. So each one is dedicated. Each of these anuvaks starts with the God to whom the prayer is addressed, and the name of the poet, as well as the rhythm in which the poem is written. So, if I made a list once, and it came to a huge number of rishis, 30, 40 rishis, and all of them realized souls. So, it was something spiritual, it was very alive, and yet at the same time, the life in the material world also was very, very active. But after that, there was a decline, and many reasons are there for that. One of the reasons is the Buddhistic influence of the world being an illusion. So slowly, this got settled in India, and the spirituality was pushed into small corners. But basically, it was not there everywhere. So the compromise was that society was left to lead it whatever it wanted, its ordinary life, and spirituality was allowed, but you have to wear Gerva clothes and remain separate from society and not disturb the static condition of society. That's a compromise that he's talking about. Okay, so the utility of the compromise in the then actual state of the world cannot be doubted. Why? He's explaining. It secured in India a society which lent itself to the preservation and the worship of spirituality. Although the public was not engaged in spiritual action, yet it gave sufficient respect and even worship to the spiritual. So the priest and the man of learning was respected, but it was restricted to only very small circles. That's what Srimad will tell you. It secured in India a society which lent itself to the preservation and the worship of spirituality. Note interestingly that all the other cultures where a spiritual progress was there, whether it be ancient Greece or whether it be the Egyptian civilization or the Mayan or the Aztec civilization, all of them vanished. But in India, it never vanished. It was preserved in small pockets here and there, but it never vanished. Okay, so that's one thing. So if this is the word preservation and the worship of spirituality. A country apart in which, as in a fortress, this highest spiritual ideal could maintain itself in its most absolute purity, unoverpowered by the siege of the forces around it. Now that's a very interesting statement he's making. Absolute purity, unoverpowered by the siege of the forces around it. Just see even geographically the location of India. On three sides, the sea. There is a sea. So invasion is not easy. On the top, the Himalayas, the tallest mountains in the world. So it was sort of isolated from the rest of the world, and it could develop its own peculiar culture. So this is also mentioned elsewhere, but this is also recognized that this was there. It is not that there was no interaction. There was an interaction. The Mughals conquered, the English came, so many things happened. But yet largely it was isolated from the world. Okay, so as in a fortress, simply is mentioning that it's a fortress. On one side, like a fortress has a moat around it, like a water body. Here we have the sea, and on top the fortress, the Himalayas. But it was a compromise, not an absolute victory. The material life lost the divine impulse to growth. The spiritual preserved by isolation its height and purity, but sacrificed its full power and serviceableness to the world. The full power and serviceableness to the world would have been the material life. Okay. In fact, all the Shastras, they suffered. Even the 64 Shastras were there in India at that time. Dancing, music, everything. Music may have been preserved, but dancing had to be revived. It was only in the 19th or 20th century that in Kalakshetra in Madras, they revived the Bharatanatyam. Okay? That was that Rukmini Arundel. She was a Tamilian, but she married an Englishman. And she revived the dancing, the old traditional dancing. So there was a large decline. That decline only is talking about the material life lost the divine impulse to growth. The spiritual preserved by isolation its height and purity, but sacrificed its full power and serviceableness to the world. Clear. Therefore, in the divine providence, the country of the yogins and the sannyasins has been forced into a strict and imperative contact with the very element it had rejected, the element of the progressive mind, so that it might recover what was now wanting to it. So what was wanting to it? The modern outlook of wanting material progress. So she had to necessarily come into contact with it. Okay? She was forced to come into contact with the progressive mind. What's she referring to? Very clear. The British invasion. The British had to come and give back the progressive mind to India. So that was one of the things that was a positive aspect of the British. Of course, they looted the country left and right, but there were some advantages. They claim that, they did a lot of things. They made the postal system, they made the railways, they made the administration, and so many things. Yes, it's true. Small things were there relatively. Even the railways were built only for their own advantage. Okay, you must remember that. So, and India, which is one of the richest countries in the world, became very, very poor, degraded quality of life, illiteracy, uncleanliness, okay, dirty. Everything became very, very poverty everywhere. So it had to be revived by the inrush of European civilization to give it back the progressive mind. And today we can see that this progressive mind is again becoming active. If you read the newspapers, then you will see that India is rising very fast, and in another 5-6 years, it will become the third largest economy in the world, apart from anything else. I don't go into details, but that's another thing. So, this is what he's saying. We go to the next para. These paras are all relatively small. We have to recognize once more that the individual exists not in himself alone, but in the collectivity, and that individual perfection and liberation are not the whole sense of God's intention in the world. The free use of our liberty includes also the liberation of others and of mankind. The perfect utility of our perfection is, having realized in ourselves the divine symbol, to reproduce, multiply, and ultimately universalize it in others. Again, a very small para, something unusual for Srimdo, but he's saying that you must remember in the integral yoga, until now in India, the aim of yoga was individual liberation. You have to liberate yourself and get free of suffering. All the yogas were designed only for individual liberation. Here is Sri Aurobindo who comes and says, no, there has to be a progress of general mankind. It has to be the collectivity that has to progress. Okay? So, that is the whole idea of having created the ashram, a collectivity, and also Auroville. So, it has to be a collective effort. These are very bold. It's not that the collectivities were not there earlier. There were ashrams and things like that. But those ashrams are usually not leading a material life. But here we are doing exactly that. We have the cinema, we have computers, we have everything, we have phones. It's all part of there's no need to reject the physical life. Okay? So, we go to the next para. Again a very small one. Therefore, from a concrete view of human life in its threefold potentialities, we come to the same conclusion that we had drawn from an observation of nature in her general workings and the 3 steps of her evolution. And we begin to perceive a complete aim for our synthesis of yoga. So, he started, if you remember, this chapter is a threefold life. But before that was the 3 steps of nature. The 3 steps of nature, first there was matter. Then, after millions of years, life came. It was a vast improvement on only dead matter. Dead matter produced living creatures, the opposite of matter. Then from there, the capacity to think also came. So nature herself is showing you that without rejecting the lower, it is creating higher and higher forms. So Sri Aurobindo says, we will follow exactly what nature is doing. Nature is not rejecting. When life comes in, it is not rejecting the matter. It is taking matter and injecting life into it. When mind also comes in, it is not rejecting life, it is improving life. Mind at its best is science. And science is trying to improve the quality of life. It is trying to make man live longer. It is trying to eliminate poverty. It is trying to eliminate disease. So mind is not rejecting life. Therefore, in the next step also, Sri Aurobindo says, we will not reject all that is there below because nature has not done that. So that's what is meaning by the last sentence. Okay, he says, and we begin to perceive a complete aim for our synthesis of yoga. We need not go only to the higher levels of consciousness by rejecting the lower. We will go to the higher levels of consciousness, no doubt, but we will not reject the lower.
Like in Isha Upanishad, when he's talking about transcendence, he uses this beautiful sentence where he says, one has to possess that which one is transcending.
Yes.
And then one reaches the true poise of transcendence.
That's
it's not
right.
an escape.
That's right. In fact, that's why the Isha Upanishad is one of the shortest Upanishads, only 18 verses. But it is so supportive of Sri Aurobindo's view that he uses it. In fact, it says something stunning. He says that when you know only the many and you don't know the one, when you know the physical world and you don't know the divine, then you are in ignorance. But if you know only the one and not the many, in a sense, it's an even darker ignorance. You must know both. You must know light, you must also know the darkness. That's also created by the divine. So you don't reject it. Okay? So that's why there are 2 volumes written on the Upanishads. One volume is a collection of many Upanishads. Okay? Kena, Katha, Taittiriya, and all the others also. He has translated also many of them. Shvetashvatara he has translated partly. But the Isha Upanishad is a volume by itself. It is so important.
And it was one of his favorites also.
Because it supports his view. Okay. Nowhere in the Upanishads elsewhere, there is this idea of Mayavada that you need to reject the lower. That mention is not there. That was there in the Advaita philosophy, not in the Upanishads. Okay? That Srimad makes a point of that. The Upanishads agree that there is darkness below. There is limitation. There is a many. And it's an ignorance. They agree. But not that it has to be rejected. That is not there. We go to the next para, all small paras. Yeah. So I read the next one. Spirit is the crown of universal existence. Matter is its basis. Mind is a link between the two. Spirit is that which is eternal. Mind and matter are its workings. Spirit is that which is concealed and has to be revealed. Mind and body are the means by which it seeks to reveal itself. Spirit is the image of the Lord of the Yoga. Mind and body are the means. He has provided for reproducing that image in phenomenal existence. Mind and body are the means he has provided for reproducing that image in phenomenal existence. All nature is an attempt at a progressive revelation of the concealed truth, a more and more successful reproduction of the divine image. So, very clearly he is stating what is the spirit and what is matter. Okay? Matter is the basis, spirit is the crown, the highest. Mind is the link between the two. And here he is using the word are the means, but he also uses the words instrumental. The body, life and mind are the instruments which the divine is using to slowly and gradually manifest himself in the physical world through evolution. That is the aim. So he has spoken about an aim, and we begin to perceive a complete aim for our synthesis of yoga. And what is that aim? The divinization of life on earth by evolution. Very clear statement. Now, how does nature work? Okay. We go to the next one. I think we have to just look at that last sentence also a little bit. All nature is an attempt at a progressive revelation of the concealed truth. Slowly it is attempting to go back to where it came from. It came from the divine, and nature is trying to go back to it through an evolution, a very slow and painful evolution. First of all, there is life, then there is mind, and now there has to be something beyond the mind. Okay? All nature is an attempt at a progressive revolution. Note the word progressive. There is a gradation of the concealed truth, a more and more successful reproduction of the divine image. So, even when there is the reflection of the divine image in the physical world, it will not be the divine himself, it will be a reflection. He has used the word reproduction of the divine. It will be like a mirror image. Okay? But still, it will be quite something. So, there will be always a difference between the spirit and material life. There will always be a difference. But it is slowly going more and more towards the divine image.
Like even, like as they say, right, even after the supramental creation, there would be Sachidananda.
Yes.
And even after Sachidananda, there would be a difference between spirit and matter. But I guess that, I mean, in a way, he says that the divine is always taking delight in creating. So that
Yeah.
in a way, it would be.
That is true. And he says that there will be evolution also after the supramental manifestation, but that evolution will be from knowledge to further knowledge. It will not be from ignorance to knowledge. Okay? So, evolution will never stop. Because if it stops, then you are putting a limit to the divine. And the divine is infinite. So, we read the next one. But what nature aims at for the mass in a slow evolution, yoga effects for the individual by a rapid revolution. It works by quickening of all her energies, a sublimation of all her faculties. While she develops the spiritual life with difficulty and has constantly to fall back from it for the sake of her lower realizations, the sublimated force, the concentrated method of yoga, can attain directly and carry with it the perfection of the mind and, even if she will, the perfection of the body. Nature seeks the divine in her own symbols. Yoga goes beyond nature to the Lord of nature, beyond the universe to the transcendent, and can return with the transcendent light and power with the fiat of the omnipotent. So, let's look at what he's saying. But what nature aims at for the mass in a slow evolution, the mass, the collectivity, okay, the entire universe. Nature is aiming in a slow evolution. In fact, slow means it is eonic. Millions of years it took for life to appear on the earth. And it took maybe another million years for animals to come. And then after that, man. But as it keeps going higher and higher, the evolution speeds up. But in the beginning it is very slow, but slowly it picks up speed. Okay? By rapid. So this is very interesting. When nature is working at the universal level, it's a very slow and painful evolution. But the individual can do it very rapidly, and it's a revolution. One, he is using the word evolution, and yoga is a revolution because it is a complete reversal of values. A revolution is something that changes values completely. Okay? So, yoga is exactly that. It's a revolution. Why? Because your whole orientation in the material world is outwards. You are using your senses and you are aware of the physical world much more than you are aware of yourself. In yoga, it's the other way around. You don't use your senses, you use subtle senses and other instruments of knowledge, and you go inwards. So it's a total U-turn, opposite values. That's why it's a revolution. Okay? It works, and how does nature work? How does she create her evolution? It works by quickening of all her energies. Quickening is also to make faster, but also to give birth. The word quicken can mean to give birth to. Okay? So, it works by quickening of all her energies. Okay? A sublimation of all her faculties. The body is a power. The vital is a power. The mind also is a power. But if they are sublimated, they can be used. Sublimated means purified and made more subtle. Then it can be used for much greater purposes than what we are using the body for. We are using the body now for enjoyment. We are using the vital for enjoyment. Where a mind also we are not using really for knowledge. It only comes a little later. The mental man is very rare, Swayambhu says. So these have to be quickened and purified, and then you can sublimate them. If you sublimate them, these powers can become very useful tools for the spiritual life. While she develops the spiritual life with difficulty and has constantly to fall back from it for the sake of the lower realizations, The lower realizations are the matter, life and mind. Okay? The sublimated force, the concentrated method of yoga, can attain directly and carry with it the perfection of the mind and, even if she will, the perfection of the body. So yoga, when you go out of your body, mind, life, you can change your mind, which is very limited to logic. The best use that man makes of mind is logic, reason. But still that's a very limited faculty. But when your consciousness goes out of the body, mind, life and goes to the spiritual planes of consciousness, light can enter the mind and completely change its functioning. And when light enters the mind, you have illumination, you have spiritual knowledge. But that light can descend even into the vital and purify the vital. It can even descend into the body, but it has not yet made the body divine. And Srimda is saying, if she will, if nature wants, okay, the perfection of the body also is possible. What is meant by the perfection of the body? He has explained in the book, The Supramental Manifestation upon Earth. Okay, we'll just touch upon it a little bit, just to make you understand what he means by total perfection of the body. What would be the perfection of the mind? Complete abolition of ignorance and knowledge. You would see the subtleties of existence and you would understand the things which you never understand now. What would be the perfection of the vital? To have ananda and enjoyment, but the purest possible enjoyment without desire, without attachment and without ego. That would be the perfection of the vital. What would be the perfection of the body? Conquest of death and conquest of disease and conquest of rigidity. It would be capable of very subtle movements and it's also rigidly, it has got a fixed form. The divine body need not have a fixed form. Okay? It can be variable and the form will not be gross matter, it will be subtle matter. Okay? And here explained this very clearly, that body, the normal human body is created in the biological way. Okay? It has to be reproduced by the male and female principle. But the divine body will be self-created. The Superman will be able to create his own body by an act of will. Just as the divine is creating the universe by an act of will. Okay? So that would be and you can also dissolve your body when you think that the world doesn't need that body anymore and the purpose of that body in the world has been completed, you can dissolve the body. But it is not death. Death is something inevitable, but that is not death. It's a choosing when to manifest and when not to manifest. That would be the perfection of the body. No disease, no death. Okay? And plasticity. No limitation by time and space and no limitation also by causality. That would be the perfection of the body. It's very interesting the phrase he has used for if she will. And who is this she? Okay? The she is the nature. And there is also another thing which we need to look at. Okay? So, if she will. So he says that evolution is going from matter to life and from life to mind, and now nature has decided that she will want to go from mind to supermind. He says that in another place, that the decision has been taken and that has to be done. So the decision is taken and Srimda and Mother have been allotted this work, assigned this work of doing it. Okay, the decision is taken, now the conditions will allow you to do it. Okay, so that's what they did. They actually brought it down. Okay, the supermind was brought down by the mother. That whole experience, most of us know about it. She says that she willed and knew at the same time that the time had come to get the divine golden light of the supermind into the physical world. And her form was as vast as the universe, and she had a hammer in her hand, and she broke that door, the golden door, which is mentioned in the Isha Upanishad. Okay? And the light that came down entered the world. And she said that when this happened, that she had the experience, it was 9 o'clock at night in the playground, she was sitting. And when she came back to her normal consciousness, she said that I was surprised that everybody is sitting quietly without the slightest knowledge of what is happening, because it's happening in the subtle plane. Okay, so that's the. But now there's one phrase there which is very interesting. We have to see. Nature seeks the divine in her own symbols. So, what is this? Nature seeks the divine in her own. What are the symbols? Matter is a symbol of Sat. The vital is a symbol of Chit Shakti. Okay? Your psychic being is a symbol of the Ananda. And your mind is a symbol of the supermind. The divine quaternary of Sat, Chit, Ananda and supermind are reflected in the lower as body, vital and life. Body, the vital and the mind.
And
they are symbols.
Yeah. And Sri Aurobindo even talks about the centers, the 7 centers. So we often know them as Mooladhara, Swadhisthana. But then he also talks that these centers have their reflection in the supramental as the 7 suns. Like the heart center has.
That's a connection between the universal and the individual.
Right.
They are all centers which correspond to the different planes of consciousness. Okay, so this is very interesting. He says yoga is nature is seeking the divine in her own symbols. Nature is wanting the divine to come down. Nature seeks the divine in her own symbols. Nature wants the divine to come down here. Yoga is doing exactly the opposite. Yoga is going beyond nature to the Lord of nature. Man is trying to ascend with his consciousness up there. And yoga is trying to bring it down. So both the things have to be done. Okay? That's why Swamsa says that we will follow nature. And if nature is trying to do this, why should we reject the body, mind, life also? We won't. Okay? So, very interesting what he's saying here. Nature seeks the divine in her own symbols. The symbols are all below. And this is also very interesting. Everything is a symbol of the divine? Yes. 2 very easy examples are the sea and the atmosphere. Okay. Take the atmosphere. At our level, there is a gravitational pull, and the air is dense enough to breathe, for us to breathe normally. As you keep going higher and higher in the Himalayas, the air becomes rare. It becomes subtler and subtler. And finally, when you go 100 miles up, there is no air. It becomes very, very subtle, and you are not anymore subject to gravitational pull. This is very clearly the ascent of spiritual planes of consciousness. Also, this is exactly reflected physically. It's a symbol. Same thing with the sea. At the lowest part of the sea, it is dark and dense. And as you keep coming up slowly, you see more and more light, and more you can even swim here. But very difficult to go down into the sea. So these are the symbols. Very interesting are, what about the flowers? How does Mother give names to flowers? So each flower is a symbol of something. So when I had to actually print that book, the flowers and their spiritual significances. So when we were printing that book, the Chinese owner of the press asked me, how is it possible to give names to flowers? How do you do it? So I had to explain to him that just as in the physical world, there are 3 levels. Okay, there is ice, there is water, and there is water vapor. So ice is the physical world. Okay? Water is the vital world, and water vapor is the mind, mental world. So you go into the subtler worlds and see what it represents. They're symbols. So what is it a symbol of? So when you go into the higher plane of consciousness, you know what it is a symbol of. You and I will not be able to do it, but mother can do it. So it's not that she is giving names to flowers haphazard, without any connection. She is going to the higher, seeing what it represents and giving the name. Okay, so that is why it is the symbol is very interesting what he's saying. So he's saying nature is trying to bring the divine down into herself, and yoga is trying to go up. Now we come to the next para. Okay, but their aim is one in the end. Okay, the divinization. The generalizations of yoga in humanity must be the last victory of nature over her own delays and concealments. Nature has created body, mind, and life to hide the divine. So she is concealing. And also her evolution is very, very slow. Her own delays. So the last victory, yoga has to become generalized in humanity, and the last victory is the divinization of everything in nature. Even as now, by the progressive mind in science, she seeks to make all mankind fit for the full development of the mental life, so by yoga must she inevitably seek to make all mankind fit for the higher evolution, the second birth, the spiritual existence. And as the mental life uses and perfects the material, so will the spiritual use and perfect the material and mental existence as the instruments of a divine self-expression. The ages when that is accomplished are the legendary Satya or Krita Yugas, the ages of the truth manifested in the symbol of the great work done when nature in mankind, illumined, satisfied and blissful, rests in the culmination of her endeavor. So, he is talking of the Indian idea of the evolution. Satya Yuga, Treta, Dwapara and Kali Yuga. And the cycle goes on. Every time the cycle goes on. There is 4 cycles. The Satya Yuga is where there is a harmony. But then there is a fall. And that harmony becomes Treta. There is a little less of harmony and there is more of conflict. Then there is Dwapara and then finally there is Kali. We are in the thick of Kali now.
Yes, dense forest of Kali.
The dense forest of Kali. But also interestingly, after the supermind has descended, certainly the Satya has started. There is no doubt about it.
Yes.
Because after the 29th February 1956, there is no doubt that the Satya has started.
And
But
which is why, when we are approaching closer to the Satya Yuga, the Kali will sort of
it is
exhaust
obstructing.
itself out. It will exhaust itself out before we enter the Satya Yuga.
And before it exhausts itself, it is trying to assert itself.
Yes.
That's why there is so much of violence, so much of chaos,
Yeah.
so much of... Even COVID is also part of that.
course.
Okay, so that's the thing.
But here he uses the word Krita Yugas, and that's a new word for me
Krita.
at least. Krita Yugas. What
Krita
does that
means
mean?
that which is done. The perfection.
So, where would that fall?
Same, or he's using the word or.
Or Satya Yuga.
Satya Yuga or
Krita
Krita.
Yuga.
It's the same.
Okay.
Kri is a word to do.
Okay.
Krita means that which is done,
Done.
which is accomplished. Okay?
Okay.
So that's
So
what
we haven't reached there yet.
No, the Satya Yuga has started.
Started.
I told you. Okay. In that sense, you never reach.
Of course.
Because it goes
It
on and
goes
on
on
and
and
on.
on, like,
In stages.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, but the cycle goes on in that way. Okay. Now, it is for man to know her meaning, nature's meaning, no longer misunderstanding, vilifying, or misusing the universal mother, and to aspire always by her mightiest means to her highest ideal. That completes the chapter. Okay. So what Srindra is saying, until now in India, the yogi has been vilifying, Okay? Calling the world vile, dirty, full of density, ignorance, suffering. So don't do that, Sundar is saying. Don't do that, okay? We must understand that your way of looking at it is wrong. So you don't need to curse nature. Nature is doing her work, okay? The divine is there hiding behind all these forms. So you have to, it is for man to know her meaning. And what is the meaning of nature? She is hiding the divine and revealing the divine slowly in steps. So understand that. No longer misunderstanding, vilifying, or misusing the Universal Mother. Is man misusing the Universal Mother? Very much. We are exploiting everything, pulling down mountains, digging and utilizing all her resources, gold, silver, and all the other gems and whatnot, removing all the petrol, using up, cutting down trees, making forests. We are completely misusing. That man has now realized, okay? So that's the climate change has come and now we have become aware of that. Still, it will take a long time to
Undo the damage.
for the whole thing to be done. But still, the beginning has started. And to aspire always by her mightiest means to her highest ideal. Which is the highest ideal? Divinization of matter. And highest means wherever she is. Suppose she is at the animal level, life is the highest. Suppose she is at the mental level, man's capacity is the highest. If in a spiritual level, that would be the highest. So use the highest and go even higher. That's what he's saying. So next time we go to the next chapter, the systems of yoga. Yoga is not something Hindu, okay? There's a misunderstanding in the world. People say that yoga is something Indian. It is not. It is discovered in India. It has been developed in India, but it is open to any mankind, anywhere they can do yoga. Okay? There are certain sections of population in the West where they say that yoga we don't want. There is something Hindu, nothing to do with So it is not that at all. Okay? We stop here today.
I have got two questions, not questions, they are my. See, the evolution, and we are talking of Satyuga and Treta, and is the evolution cyclic or linear?
No,
Or
it is never linear.
It is all in eternity. It is all in eternity, I presume.
Yeah, it is always cyclical.
It is.
It goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down. That's why the cycle repeats itself. Satya, Treta, Dwapara and Kali.
So what Sri Aurobindo talks about supramental, can we assume that it has already was there in the past somewhere? No.
Maybe not the supramental. Certainly the supramental was not on earth. It was realized. But there was a lot of progress, spiritual progress at that time. But there was a fall. There is no doubt that there is a fall. So, and why the fall, we will discuss also that the progress is not proportionate to all the three levels. Spiritually, India was very advanced, but materially we have fallen very much below. Europe was very advanced. He has said that earlier in the para. Europe was very advanced materially, but spiritually it was not so advanced. So there has to be a balance.